Saying I'm a Coney Island baby at the end of that song is like saying I haven't backed off an inch, and don't you forget it. Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode number 44. And in today's exciting episode, we will be talking about this, finally, 1975 or 1976, is depending on how you're keeping score. Lou Reed's incredible masterpiece, Coney Island Baby, one of my favorite albums ever made. Now, the last video, I kind of set a new record for myself where the last video was supposed to basically be the introduction to Coney Island Baby, and I never actually got round to reviewing the album at hand. So it just became a Lou Reed in 1975 video, but really, and the beginning of this trilogy of videos, which was never intended to be that. So I honestly thought I was going to spend 5 minutes on Metal Machine music. I thought I was going to spend 2 minutes on Lou Reed live. The bulk of it was going to be Coney Island Baby, and then I was going to wrap it up at the end with Rock and Roll Heart. And how ridiculous that I thought that was going to be possible. So at any rate, this is the second part. This is going to be Coney Island Baby centric. It's going to be, I'm assuming, a long journey. So settle in, get comfortable, and hopefully we will all enjoy this. I actually started filming this video last week, and I did not like the results, and I scrapped it. So that is somewhere on a hard drive somewhere, and never to be seen again. I didn't get very far. I sort of stopped midday, and I just got really discouraged. So I am a week behind from where I wanted to be with this, but it needs to be done right, especially with an album like this. So I suppose that I will start with my own history of the album. I have a lot of history with this album. This album has been very, very important at different stages of my life, and I, in the last video, touched upon the different perspectives of art emerging over time. And this is definitely an album that has grown with me as, from when I first got it. So how did I first get this album? So I was still a relative newcomer to the Lou Reed solo works. And I was so again, the 1992 Rolling Stone album guide rears its head yet again. I was kind of scared off of Reed's solo work by just how kind of nasty they were about it. Berlin hadn't had its critical reevaluation yet, and Rock and Roll Animal hadn't had its, and they really painted most of the 70s as kind of this inconsistency of mediocrity. Metal Machine music, of course, was written about as a 2-album fuck you, and et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of didn't know where to start, and I really did just find a lot of it intimidating. So I only knew Walk on the Wild Side and Dirty Boulevard, right? So anyway, early in 96, I would have bought Transformer. That just seemed like a logical starting point if I'm going to start checking out his solo albums, because I had been purely Velvet Underground, and I knew as much Velvet Underground stuff as it was possible for that I could afford on my meager teenage budget, getting paid in cash under the table at my at the resale shop that I worked at. So anyway. I only had the one album, which I liked and thought was cool, but the rest of it I really, really didn't know. And then my second girlfriend, I made my second trip to New York, I want to say in February or March of 1996, I think February, and my second girlfriend made me this to listen to in the car. This was a mixtape that she made called The Virgin Machine. And this is featuring the track list printed out on a ripped out page from one of her dad's Playboys. And I believe this is a pre-famed Cameron Diaz. So anyway, there were a number and I don't know if we'll ever be able to see this or not, there were a number of Lou Reed solo songs on here. So this was my introduction to getting a sense of what Lou Reed was as a solo artist on here. And she had mentioned that Coney Island Baby, she had an ex-boyfriend who also was a fan of Coney Island Baby, and that was a good one. So I don't remember what the record store was. It was somewhere in the East Village. It wasn't a particularly famous one. It wasn't a particularly large one, but it was very good. And that was where I came across this. So this was the copy that I bought in February or March of 1996. I would have been, 18 years old, and I just saw it and I thought, how beautiful is that's there. Also, my second girlfriend was a very big John Cale fan, and up in the sort of racks behind the cash register was John Cale's album Fear. So I bought Fear and this on the same day, and very, very, very carefully brought them back. I was very nervous about them cracking, and so I remember like packing my luggage, being really persnickety to try to pad the luggage as much as I could so the records didn't break on the way back home. And while I don't remember what the record store was, I do remember that a year later, I went back to that same record store and bought the George McRae "Rock Your Baby" album, where I paid an arm and a leg for it. But who knows? I'm sure that it is long gone now. If other music is gone, then that's got to be gone. So at any rate, but this is most likely, unless my memory is bad. Maybe I might have gotten the Blue Mask at some earlier in there too. I don't remember, but this would have been one of the very first Lou Reed solo albums that I ever heard, and kind of started to shape my opinion of what he was. And think like, well, this album is incredible. I love this as much as I love anything else. What else is the Rolling Stone album guide getting wrong, right? So anyway, so that's a little bit of my own personal history with the album. But I will now get back a little bit into where Lou Reed was getting ready to do this album. So the Star Truckin' Tour, unceremoniously, he left it. The lawsuits with the Katz brothers really began in earnest. Reed was financially destitute, and Ken Glancy from RCA Records, I don't know if he was getting like a receivership from the courts, or if Ken Glancy was giving him like a stipend, or maybe taking it out of advance money or something. That part I don't know. But Reed was put up by Ken Glancy in the Gramercy Hotel in New York. So it was Lou, Rachel, the Dachshunds, and Reed's guitars, and lots of coffee-flavored ice cream, and not much else. So from what I have read around this time, Reed usually only had about $25 in cash on him. He really was strapped. He was doing depositions by day, trying to pull songs together, and then get ready to record by night. And record by night they did for 10 days, between October the 18th to the 28th of 1975 at Media Sound in New York. Lou Reed made this album. Now, according to interviews, Reed said that they spent half the time mixing, so that most of the time that it was divided up pretty nearly between recording and mixing. I do wonder if the mixing involved overdubs, because I feel like that would make a lot of sense if there was a lot of extensive overdubbing occurring. Reed had assembled a new band, and so for this album, we have Bruce Yaw on bass, who would go on to basically be the bass player for the Everyman Band for a little while longer. Mike, so I'm going to say this is Mark II of the Everyman Band. Then we have Michael Sikorsky, really don't know, on drums. So he was retained. But then, if you know your history, and I only kind of do, future of Kiss recording sessions, Bob Kulick. So I think I'm a little shaky on this one, but I think Bob Kulick plays on Unmasked, on Dynasty, Unmasked, maybe the studio songs on Alive 2, maybe even Love Gun, maybe also some of the solo albums. The 78 solo albums. I'm a little shaky on that, so I don't remember. But he's on more than one. And Bob Kulick has gone on to be somewhat notorious. I think he goes to a lot of KISS conventions, and I think he has a tendency to sort of sound off a lot. I think he thinks that he should have been in KISS. So I know that he has kind of an outsized reputation at this point. But further KISS connection. So there were more KISS connections long before Lou Reed co-wrote A World Without Heroes and whatever the hell the other song is from the music from The Elder. And I don't remember what the other song is, but World Without Heroes is that video is truly something else. But he is the brother of KISS 80s guitar Bruce Kulick, who's on all of the main guts of the hair metal albums. So like Crazy Nights and Hot in the Shade and those. I forget which one is the first one that he's on where he took over from Mark St. John. I just don't remember. It's been a long time. I used to have a KISS comic book that outlined all their history. But that was in 1990, and 1990 was so very long ago, was it not? So anyway, I just don't remember. But we also have two session singers, which I think will be coming up a lot. Joanne Vent and Michael Wenderoff. I looked them up. It looks like they had done kind of 70s, like, I don't know, maybe sort of singer-songwritery, kind of soul funk-ish sort of records. I didn't really go that far into it, but what I was mostly interested in is the producer of this album, Godfrey Diamond. Now, Godfrey Diamond was a true, so there he is, right, listed right there, okay? So Godfrey Diamond, I knew, it was around this time, post Katz Brothers, that Reed had started self-producing. And I thought maybe my little theory as like an 18, 19-year-old, because I had never heard of Godfrey Diamond, right? So my little theory back then was Reed wanted to self-produce. He was having all these problems with RCA, and so he produced under a pseudonym, right? Because that was a thing in the 70s. You know, George O. Harrison, John Lennon recording is my personal favorite. He used many, but Mel Torment, I love that. So I just assumed that Godfrey Diamond was somehow a nom de plume that Reed was using. When I first got on the internet, this would have been around 98, 99, so somewhere in 99, 2000, there were a bunch of Lou Reed fan sites. Most of them were out of Europe, and they were really good. It was a kind of a treasure trove of information. There's a lot of stuff I'd never known, a lot of stuff I'd never seen before. I mean, and some of those sites are still out there too. And I'll see if I can link to them. I was also on a Lou Reed Yahoo News group. So that was interesting because there were people who would try and commandeer it, and it was an odd one. Once I defended Lou Reed in it, and somebody accused me of working for him. I thought that was pretty funny. I was like some kid in his 20s, in the basement, But anyway, but there was, I say all that because there was a website. It was like a GeoCities Angel Fire website about Godfrey Diamond, right? And it was like, it had like a bad pixelated scan of this album cover, right? And it was, I want to say it was called The God Prod. But it had virtually no information on it. There were like links to like CD Now or something. I mean, it was a very weird site, and it didn't provide much in the way of answers. Though there was a small amount of information that led me to believe that Godfrey Diamond was like an actual person and not a Lou Reed nom de plume. So you flash forward years later now, you can look up his entire history. He had a long and illustrious production career, and he's still out there. He's still producing music for current artists. And I follow him on Instagram, so there is now no mystery around Godfrey Diamond. I know who this guy is. There's pictures of him working in the studio. There he is. But this is, I mean, to me, this is, and for everyone involved, I mean, this is truly like his claim to immortality, because I love the production on this album. It is a beautifully produced album, and boy, are we going to be getting into the details of that. So the other thing I wanted to touch upon first in this little intro is, so, you know, it's the fall of 1975. It's at the Gramercy Hotel, and that was the base for the Dylan Rolling Thunder Tour. And apparently inquiries were made to have Reed join the tour. And that is truly one of the greatest what-ifs in the entire history of rock and roll. I honestly kind of put it up there. If you think about this in context, it's not that far off from what if Jimi Hendrix and Miles Davis had recorded together. I'm gonna say that. The idea of Reed, of 1976 Reed, especially given the level of his live performances at this point, right? That he had resurrected and was the mightiest fucking performer, right? The like full utter control, utter command of himself on stage as a force for the music to come through, right? On that tour with that version of Dylan and Roger McGuinn, and so, you know, he would have had Mick Ronson, who he'd already worked with on Transformer, Ginsberg's there, like, that would have been absolutely fucking transcendent. Now, the two people they didn't get were Lou Reed and Patti Smith. Patti Smith already had her own touring setup, okay? Now, Patti Smith, I think, just would have fit in all too comfortably. Patti Smith might have even sort of faded into the background, if you will, right? Patti Smith is almost too much of a no-brainer. It's too easy. But Reed would have been such a fascinating fucking curveball in the Rolling Thunder, and he would have brought his own fucking version of the Rolling Thunder. The idea of, I mean, that's as much of a what if as if like Neil Young, like what if Neil Young had been on the Rolling Thunder? I mean, either two of those guys is like truly something to behold as a concept. The other thing is, think about what Reed's potential scenes in Ronaldo and Clara would have looked like. Just imagine that. Imagine, like, if you think that the scenes with David Blue are good, and they are. David Blue nearly steals the show in his brief appearances. Imagine what the hell Reed would have done. It would have been unbelievable. So, at any rate, it is truly one of the great what-ifs. Also, what would that have led to for Reed in terms of, like, going forward, making a next album, etc., etc. You know, it boggles the mind. So one of the great what-ifs, and thank you, Katz Brothers, for screwing us all over and culturally depriving us of all of that. The other thing I wanted to touch upon before I get really into album talk, and I've now spent a lot of time setting up Lou Reed in 1975, but I think one of the other things I wanted to touch upon was, at this point, you know, Reed is going to CBGB's, he's going to see television. There's that tape out there on YouTube of when Danny Fields first played him the Ramones, and his true excitement at hearing the Ramones. I'll link to that, because that really is a really kind of beautiful thing to hear. And to hear Reed so enthusiastic and so unguarded, you know. He obviously knew about Patti Smith. He definitely knew about the Talking Heads, and we'll touch upon that probably in the next video. So Reed, you know, Reed is in the mix, but also with Dylan and with Neil Young. Reed was a very big fan, very big fan of Neil Young's Zuma album, in particular the song Danger Bird. This is the quote that Lou Reed said specifically about Danger Bird. "It makes me cry. It is the best I have heard in my life. The guy is a spectacular guitarist. Those melodies are so marvelous, so calculated, constructed note to note. He must have killed to get those notes. It puts my hair on end." So you have you have Neil Young, you have Dylan reestablishing himself, you have everything that's happening in New York, and Reed, is back on his heels, right? And he had spent 1975 basically reestablishing himself, Metal Machine music, as I talked about, instead of being a fuck you, being a more of a wiping the slate clean. And Reed had to really rely on his own talent and the gravity of what he could bring. And I do believe, I don't want to read in too much, but I do believe that he really wanted to assert himself into this moment. That, Cale was doing great work. Like, all these different people at that point were really doing great work. Bowie, that's the year Bowie had Young Americans, but he was going into station to station. Like, all these people are doing great work, important work, what Iggy Pop would call the immortal shit. And I will be making this comparison throughout this video, but I believe in a strange way, and these two artists have always been very linked to me. They've always been very, very, very important to me. But I believe that in a way, I've always sort of thought of the Velvet Underground as sort of like the alternate reality Beatles. I've always thought of the Stooges as sort of the alternate reality Rolling Stones. So, in a way, and this shit from this 1987 interview where Reed talks about the Beatles in a negative light. Reed praised the Beatles plenty of other times. There's other quotes in other interviews where he talks about their unbelievable talent level. Like, Reed was palling around with Paul McCartney at one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame dinners. Like that's a lot of that. The Lou Reed hates the Beatles thing has really been overblown and is very, very stupid. But so in the same way that I have always sort of linked some of these things, I am going to say that Coney Island Baby is kind of the personal, more vulnerable, more sort of neighborhood version of this album. And that these two things, because in both cases, the album preceding it had been a full wiping the slate clean, had been a full stop to everything that had come before. And they had set up the elements with the musicians, the producers, how they were, what their relationship to the press was, etc., etc. They were all sort of back on their heels, right? They were both back on their heels, with John coming out of primal scream therapy, right? And they both had to rely on their talent to go forward. And what they came up with in both cases are very, 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 very sophisticated albums that are hugely modernist and forward-thinking, while at the same time very respectful and reflective of their musical traditions and their deepest held musical interests. So, these albums have always been highly, highly connected to me. And there is, the vulnerability here, how can I have a feeling when all my feelings have been denied, is one of the most important lines in a song ever fucking written, right? And we'll be getting to some of the lines on this album, right? So these albums, and the other thing is, they're both very ambitious albums, very sophisticated albums, but they don't hit you over the head with their ambition or their sophistication. There aren't spiraling suites, they aren't double albums, they are what they are. They are plain spoken, yet very sophisticated and very ambitious, and a lot of it's under the surface. And there are roiling depths of emotions under the surface and under the more user-friendly presentation, let's say. So these two albums, I think, are both masterpieces, and I'll be talking about more of the connections as we go on, because I think that there are some very serious ones. And not just these two albums, but actually between these two guys, they both loom kind of very large for me. So I think we're kind of in a good spot to actually start getting to album talk And so away we go. In my talking about Reed putting all of the elements together, I think that one of the reasons what was so important about him putting the elements together, whether it was him reestablishing with Cale and Andy Warhol, whether it was him reestablishing control on stage, him reestablishing his songwriting voice, him reestablishing control in the recording studio, all of that. I feel like Reed was, if you look at the pattern of how the first album was made, this is almost like the opposite end of the spectrum. This is Reed asserting control, and he said, he said again and again, the other shows don't count. I think he really was clearing the way, and I think he was declaring himself as an artist and as a man, and that is part of what is so powerful about this album. So I think that, and I've debated talking about this in the next video or not. So I had talked a lot about in the last video about abstractions, and I had a Third Coast left an excellent comment. Thank you, Third Coast, about Reed's interest when he was in college in Ornette Coleman, and that he would go and listen to Ornette Coleman. He couldn't afford to get into the venue where Coleman was playing. I forget where it was. I guess he was doing like a residency, but Reed would listen through the windows outside the venue where they were playing, and he was very into Ornette Coleman. Ornette Coleman, the Free Jazz album is the two, and now I'm going to forget if it's the double trios. I'm getting confused with my King Crimson, or the double quartets, maybe playing in two different things in each of the speakers, right? So that Metal Machine music was something of a going back. It was something also of a root statement connected to his interest in Ornette Coleman. Ornette Coleman / his trumpet player Don Cherry will be playing a prominent role in the next video. When we get to that, we will get to that. But I thought that was a really insightful comment and a really important comment, because Reed's audiophile stuff is well documented. I talked about that last time. But also Reed's interest in the studio itself, using the studio as an instrument, and different textures, and really using it the way, not so much as a painter. I would almost say Reed really was more like a photographer, and using double exposures and light and shade. So maybe really coming more from maybe like a Warhol aesthetic, maybe as opposed to a more painterly Kubrick aesthetic, something like that. That Reed was somewhere between what Warhol was doing and Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, perhaps, what's my man's name? Samuel Fuller. That aesthetic, the black and white was a significant part of his music and of his thinking and overall aesthetics. So, and that would make sense why Warhol would resonate with him, and it also would make sense years later why, in his wonderful song The Velvet Underground, why Jonathan Richman would describe it as sounds as stark as black and white stripes, which I think is a perfect way of explaining things. So all of that is to say this is a root statement, right? This is a root statement. And what I mean by a root statement is Coney Island Baby. Coney Island Baby in and of itself comes from the doo-wop song of the Excellents. So they had their glorious song Coney Island Baby. And if you look at Reed had an encyclopedic knowledge of early rock and roll. Like John Lennon, he's the man who loved rock and roll, right? And Reed apparently during the Velvet Underground years had his record collection stolen. He apparently had quite the collection of obscure early 50s rock and roll. But what people don't understand is, like the Beatles, who technically started recording in 1958, and like George Clinton, Lou Reed goes back to the 50s. So those early recordings of the Jades that stuff. So Reed has recordings that predate Pickwick. So Reed was in a very, yes, it was small, but he was a contemporary of that. You know what I mean? So he goes all the way back to the beginnings of rock and roll. And I think that one of the things that unfortunately has happened, and I actually kind of blame things like the Rolling Stone album guide for this, is I feel like a lot of doo-wop doesn't really get the credit that it deserves. And this is a modernist doo-wop album. It is a modernist experimental doo-wop album. It is the other side of Metal Machine music. But a lot of the same aesthetics, I think, are present in both. And I will be explaining that. I'm not just going to leave that hanging out there. So I think that, a lot of doo-wop doesn't really get the credit anymore. I think that a lot of, things like, and not that this is a bad thing, but like stuff, I think a lot of sort of Johnny Cash, Little Richard, like a lot of those things have been put forward as more significant and important, and a lot of more obscure, straight up R&B and jump blues has been given sort of more cred. But really, doo-wop is what is so fascinating about doo-wop when you really, really look at it, is what doo-wop is the cross section between R&B. It is the points to rock and roll because it can go up tempo and be exciting and you can dance to it, and it's great. It's fun songs about sad stuff, and there's nothing more rock and roll than that, right? But it also then ties back, and this is part of what's so interesting, because if you look at Chuck Berry and if you look at jump blues and what that came out of, none of that stuff was created in a vacuum, and none of that stuff was... None of the vibe of that stuff was necessarily like, screw you, we're tearing everything down. It was another evolution of music, right? So, excuse me. So, part of what is so interesting when you really, really listen to the great doo-wop is you have the vocal harmonies. And it can become rock and roll, and it can point to rock and roll. It can also point slightly back to jump blues. It obviously connects to R&B. It obviously connects to gospel. But in some of the, like, especially like the stuff that doesn't have a rhythm section and some of the really stark vocal harmonies plus guitar, what you have is a direct connection to jazz. And that a lot of those songs had been standards. You have a direct lineage back to jazz. So you are not just in the music of the 50s and then into the early 60s. You're actually going back. And in some cases, you're actually going back quite a ways. So, for instance, one of the great masterpieces of all time is the Flamingos' "I Only Have Eyes for You." That's in a Busby Berkeley movie from fucking 1935, right? So the tendrils and the crossover of doo-wop, and what you can follow all of those things too. You can follow those harmonies into the Everly Brothers. You can then follow it across the Atlantic over then into the early Beatles, on and on and on. You can connect it to a lot of things. You can connect the standalone electric guitar down into some of the stuff that Hank Williams is doing. Like, you can make a lot of connections. You can connect it to Scotty Moore and Elvis. The tendrils are far and wide. And Reed is actually, he's not going for like retro Chuck Berry moves or recasting. He's not doing 50s covers, but what he's actually doing is he's actually taking the root music that he grew up loving and that meant so much to him, and he is expanding the dynamics and expanding the language of it in a really, really brilliant way that you wouldn't necessarily even notice if you haven't like listened to that music or thought about that music. The other thing that's really, really fucking important, and again, this business about abstractions, right? This business about abstractions. a lot of doo-wop is like the purest, like the purest, like The Wind by is it the Paragons? A couple groups recorded The Wind, but the Wind is like such an absolutely pure. It is a clear glass of water. It is such a pure and distilled statement of love, and there is so much like classical beauty. It's not challenging beauty. It is purely beautiful in and of itself, right? So you listen to that music, and it's uncorrupted. It's uncorrupted beauty. It is uncorrupted innocence, right? And what happened to fucking Reed as his inchoate feelings are starting to form and he's starting to develop? They put him in fucking shock. They put him in fucking shock. Is it any wonder that Reed would get into split speaker things and get into all sorts of double presentations, and that he would start to learn to have to become comfortable with abstractions? So this is so as much as this is a root statement for Reed, this is a root statement for Reed, and this is a very brave root statement for Reed, because he's shucking off what was placed upon him in such a gross manner, in such an inhuman manner. This is a very, very, very brave fucking statement, right? And it's based in and then an expansion of the language that he was so conversant in. So I will just say this now. So I made a playlist. It is called The Moonlight and You. That is a riff because Reed jokingly said that this album could have been called Lou Reed, The Moonlight and You, hence the name of that. I didn't want to give it away too early. But if you go through that playlist, I'll link to it or whatever. Go through that. Those are all specific songs that Reed has mentioned. Those are all, or specific groups. In some cases, I didn't have a specific title, so there's a little bit of liberties taken, but it all fits together. And the specific songs, just to name my sources, come from Reed's beautiful and impassioned, I think it's 1988 induction of Dion into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Reed is naming specific things. He also has named other specific things along the way. And I pay attention to that because because truly, again, along with John Lennon, the man who loved rock and roll, like the man who really believed in it, and not in some weird cornball way, not in some strange for faux revolutionary means, but for actual human beings living life and getting from day to day means, the real shit. Like getting to the core, the square root, the real stuff, okay? So that is part of why this album is so fucking brilliant. Let's talk about the first song. So the first song is Crazy Feeling. Do you see why it took me 2 hours just to get to this fucking point? All right, so... Do you see why it takes me so goddamn long to make videos? Jesus Christ. There's fucking YouTubers who make like 15 videos in the time it takes. Anyway, so Crazy Feeling. So the album starts off with Crazy Feeling. Crazy Feeling. So how long is it? 2 minutes 50. Okay. So Crazy Feeling starts off bass of acoustic guitar, and right away we've got Bob Kulick. We've got Bob Kulick playing gorgeous celestial stuff, and I use that word very specifically. So, and then Reed like just slices right through. Like his voice is so perfectly mixed. His voice is front and center, and it is filled with so much emotion. And this is like real stuff. This isn't, the stakes are for real. And I think we've all been in that situation, right? I think we all know what that is. He talked about it as being a very direct love song to Rachel, and that he had been up for a few days when he met Rachel, and it was this sort of revelation. I think he called it the hyper real state. And I am very familiar with that state. I'm sure you are as well, and not by the same means. Not because I'm amphetamines, but just because of the nothing to do with that at all. Purely the force of my own manias, and depending on when I was younger. If I'm being perfectly honest, fueled by runts and sweet tarts, sweet tarts, and cherry Coke. So that was my hyper real. That was my hyper real 2 or 3 day state. Fucking hand shaking. Fucking stare, like 1,000-yard stare. Fucking I know it in my own little context, right? But we all know it on some level, and that's the thing with Reed is he makes it he makes it relatable in your life. But it's one thing to chronicle. It's one thing to chronicle the bars of New York, and I always felt like he really evokes the feeling of what those places are like, and that he's just kind of floating through that, right, ghost like. And I love that, and that's great, and I love the love song aspect of it. But the real key is a lot of songwriters. I always feel like the choruses, not with a lot of songwriters, but there's plenty of songs where I feel like choruses are like a letdown. Like choruses are like, a lot of times I feel like choruses are sort of hack time. There's like the real songwriting that happens, and then the chorus is like lame-o, and the chorus really is the point, because the fact that Reed puts it to the crazy feeling, because that's what you're really looking for, right? You want somebody who has that crazy feeling deep inside, and then he says, and I can see it in your eyes, because isn't that like that's what you really want, because like when you're trying to connect with somebody, like if you actually want to connect with somebody, if you really want to get through to somebody, and you really want somebody to get through to you, you want them to know like what they're getting. You want them to know like what is really fucking in your heart, and not just in your heart, but also way, way, way in the back of your mind. And you need to know that they have that crazy feeling. And the fact that he says, I can see it in your eyes, because isn't that the thing? Like that's what I would look for with a girl back then, you know what I mean? That's I was straight into the eyes. I'm an INFJ apparently, and I would do the INFJ stare, and because I would really, really, really fucking want to like look deep into their eyes because of that, like to see if they have that crazy feeling. Like I fucking absolutely get it, And sometimes like if I was with a girl, like on a date or something, and I wasn't really sure about her, I'd put on if she didn't know the Stooges Open Up and Bleed, I would play that song, and I felt that was like the quickest portal to that place, and I would like stare, like, yeah, do you like that song? Like, what do you like about it? And that's the thing. I mean, eventually I fortunately grew out of that phase, but like it was like vitally important to me, and it's just, but as a portrait of Rachel, that second verse is just absolutely, absolutely beautiful. What a beautiful verse, and what a beautiful evocation of love out of the dirt of New York City. Love growing out of the fucking center of the Demamond, right? And reclaiming love out of that, right? Out of the dirt, right? And fucking beautiful. Like it's such a beautiful song. And then the church bells. I know that the guy from Par Ubu didn't like the church bells. Fuck that shit. The church bells are beautiful, and the church bells are a beautiful echo of Bob Kulick's absolutely glorious celestial, and that guitar tone. Bob Kulick with the fucking guitar tone, again, just like the voice slicing through. And really, it starts to become like a gospel or doo-wop sort of call and response thing. Absolutely gorgeous. And then, oh God, and I didn't even get to the fucking backing vocals of what are their names? Joanne and Michael. Beautiful, beautiful, Like, and it never overshadows Reed's voice. It all comes together perfectly. The rhythm section is perfect. Bruce Yaw's bass playing is perfect because he's doing some nice counter melody stuff in the intro. It is a beautiful, perfect song. 2 minutes 50, like lights out, like a quiet little classic. Right? Because it doesn't draw attention to itself as, oh, I'm a major song. And yet it is. And yet it kind of contains a universe. Because you see the place. Like, this is Scorsese movies, you know what I mean? The beautiful, the great movies that Marty made about New York, so frank and brutal and so brilliant, you know? Like, this is it. This is Travis Bickle and this is Johnny Boy. This is Mean Streets. It's beautiful. And it's not for nothing that in fucking Mean Streets they play fucking Phil Spector songs. Of course they do. Of course they do. Right? Because that's the stuff that's the music. The fucking Ronettes. Ronnie Ronette is the voice that we're all hearing in the fucking back of our heads, echoing. All of us fucking wounded romantics. You know? All of us who got, like, you know, fucking... we were too innocent for our own good. And we got fucking brutalized, you know? And, like, we all fucking have Ronnie Ronette in the back of our heads. I fucking do. You know, that stuff resonates really, really hard, you know? It's one of the reasons why Phil is such a tragic cautionary tale. He was a tragic cautionary tale before he did what he did, you know what I mean? Alright, moving right along. Next song, Charlie's Girl. 2.5 minutes. We're fucking knocking them out. These are fucking perfect songs. Okay, so Charlie's Girl. First of all, one of the things you'll notice about the drum sound is the drum sound, and the same thing on Crazy Feeling. In one of the interviews, Reed, and I always find this sort of stuff interesting with him. Reed apparently in this period was a really, really big fan of Dobie Gray. And if you listen to it, that's the Dobie Gray drum sound. That's the I want to get lost in your rock and roll and drift away. Like that is that drum sound. I think that's fascinating. Like, I love that Reed was drawing from that as a contemporary influence. That's cool, you know, because that's also one of the other things that I love about Reed. As much of an obscuritan as he can be, he fucking listened to the radio. He loved Diana Ross. He loved Motown. Like, Reed, as much as he was an obscuritan, he wasn't, not at all, you know, and he loved rock and roll, and he loved R&B and soul music, and that all is just that conglomeration is just so vital in terms of how he makes records. So anyway, so Charlie's Girl, beautiful pace, beautiful tempo, because it's a great little rock and roll song without going out of its way to rock. You know, it's a great loping pace. It does remind me of Zuma in its kind of loping pace. And then what's interesting is Reed's vocal is very much prefigures how he starts singing on Street Hassle, but then on the Bells. I feel like this is the premiere of that voice. And the lyrics are fucking great, because the lyrics are, instead of chronicling the Warhol crowd, this is chronicling kind of the Lister Circle and just stuff like these quick glimpses. And what's interesting too is then you again have the backing vocals and these very beautiful sort of soothing backing vocals, kind of smoothing everything out. But Victor Bockris, I think, described this album as a bouquet of roses with razor blades inside, you know, and I always really, really liked that description, and that's what's in Charlie's Girl, because there's a lot of violence. It's a very violent song, but it doesn't present itself in a violent way. So it's like a beautiful, like, lovingly crafted shot in a movie of like. Of a fight or a battle or something like that, you know. I've always kind of thought of it, and I love boxing. I've always kind of thought of it in terms of boxing, that it's like, can a fight be beautiful? In some ways, if it's framed a certain way, then yeah. And this is just like a beautiful, cool, loping rock and roll song that is, again, it's just this mini classic with great diamond fucking sharp lyrics. Fucking fantastic. Reed's voice, perfect. Like, perfect. Like, two great, perfect, unassuming songs. But then we have the third song on the album. Now, Lou Reed, the intros of Lou Reed's songs, whether it's Waves of Fear, whether it's Finish Line on Set the Twilight Reeling, whether it's Sweet Jane, Reed's guitar intros are some of the greatest pieces of music that he ever composed, and I love his intros. The only other intro that I put on his in his realm, not the only intro. That's too broad of a sweeping statement even for me. But the beginning of is it the beginning of Damage Incorporated? I haven't listened to that record in a while. But like that, like those bass sonorities, like, oh my god, that might be my single favorite moment on that entire album, you know? Anyway, so we have this acoustic guitar intro. It's a duet between the acoustic guitar and the bass. So Bruce Yaw playing beautiful, beautiful bass way high up on the neck, and these really simple chords, but oh my god, is it so evocative. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. The intro to She's My Best Friend has played in my mind thousands of times since 1996. I don't know how many times that has played over and over in my head. It is absolutely glorious. It is, for me, it is the fucking music of the spheres. He has me on the intro. He doesn't even need anything else. The intro is, I'm fucking good with just the intro. And then it comes in, and it's a very, very, very restrained tempo. So I'm going to read a quote from Read about this song from this time period. That song is 10 years old. Then I didn't have a best friend to write it for or sing it for. That just happens to be true. So that's very interesting. And I talked in the last video about how I wasn't really too into the Velvet Underground version. But now Reed does have somebody to sing it for. Right? And he does have somebody to visualize while he's singing it. And first of all, Bob Kulick, absolutely beautiful. Bob Kulick fills in all those little spaces. Nearly every single note he plays is vital. To, like, just absolutely vital. Like, every note is the perfect note to have chosen. And every run that he plays, like, his run of licks through this song are just absolutely perfect. Like, absolutely perfect. Some have a lot of attitude and bite. Some are just mellifluous and gorgeous. Like he just keeps pushing and pulling against everything that's happening, right? Partially because Yaw and Sachorsky are, this is like a shining moment. Like Sachorsky plays fucking beautifully, and has just enough room to do some really, really cool fills and rhythmic churning, but really this is a big wide open space. Again, Zuma it's like a produced version of Zuma in some respects, but it has, the lyrics are interesting because it does sound like somebody who didn't have somebody to write it for, right? Because the lyrics, and I don't know about the specifics of this, but apparently the lyrics are filled with a lot of then current East Village gay slang or gay terminology. I don't know what that is. So I've just always sort of seen it as like semi-post Dylan surrealism, mixed with the kind of reportage style of that Reed has. So, but I can't really get into the specifics of some of the imagery chosen for the lyrics, other than to say it ties back into what is more explicitly laid out in Charlie's Girl, right? And what is kind of implied under the surface of Crazy Feeling. But what matters is when it gets to that chorus. Because when it gets to that chorus and the backing vocals kick in, and Reed sings, if you want to see me, I'm over by the window where the light is. Like that is that's a perfect lyric. I'm over by the window where the light, God damn it. Only a fucking wounded romantic would sing that. Only somebody who knows. Only somebody who's loved and lost is gonna fucking sing I'm over by the window where the light is. God damn it. So, but the singing, this is, I don't know, the best singing he's done. Well, Berlin is an awfully tall order too. This is some of the best singing that he's ever done. I mean, this is just so expressive, and this is his soul. I think he tried to sound more soulful at different times in the later 70s and in the mid 80s, where he tried to kind of ape soul singer mannerisms, but this is Lou Reed's soul. This is the kid from Long Island, and this is him as a fucking man, and this is him as a man who knows what he wants and believes in what he's saying and cares about what he's saying and singing. But this is also incredibly vulnerable, you know, and it all just comes through the voice. It is a magnificent vocal performance. Beautiful for the fucking ages, right? And then the way that they're able to pull it all back, and part of that is Godfrey Diamond's beautiful fucking production and the mixing and the use and the shifting use of textures and the ability to really use the mixing board as an instrument. And it's the next step beyond the incredible things that Reed achieved with the closet mix on of the Third Velvet Underground album, right? Because I think that is like one of the most revolutionary fucking things that ever happened in the history of rock and roll. Like Reed using the band, just the entire band, treating the band as an instrument, and then placing his voice, and so that the whole thing then is like a duet. Like the closet mix of the Third Velvet Underground album is one of my favorite things of all time, and one of the reasons I consider Lou Reed a genius. If that was the only album that he ever made, he would be a genius just off of that, because that's like fucking next level. Like that's the next step beyond what Arthur Lee was doing on Love's Forever Changes. It's fucking incredible stuff, right? So, but this is then the next development of that, because of the ability to like build up this like beautiful fucking surge of emotion and just utter absolute classical beauty, and to raise it up and then just to pull it all back, but you hear the fade as it's being pulled back. By the way, as good as the remasters are, okay, as good as they are, that intro is best on vinyl. This actually somehow blunts, it slightly diminishes the fucking impact. Like this is still the best way to hear it, and I just listened to it a half hour ago for the purposes of making this video. I just did an A/B, so I know of what I speak. So, but then it also then goes into that outro section where that absolutely glorious outro section with Bob Kulick soloing his fucking ass off, like again, beautiful stuff, almost verging on shred, but like really, but again, like celestial and graceful, and like every note is fucking perfect. And then you've got fucking my man Bruce Yaw, so there's the beautiful stuff that he's doing counterpoint to the acoustic guitars in the intro, but then at the end where he's coming in and like and doing offbeat accents on them, like, God, amazing. It's so goddamn good. And again, part of what I think is so interesting though is you then, as beautiful as it is, and as much as you're looking at the greatness of this image before you, right, and you're subjectively experiencing it, what's cool is they pull all that back, and all of a sudden you see the set, and so you just have those naked background voices, the da, like you just have like their ability to do that, and their ability to like shift these things and build these peaks, even some of the breaks in between the verses where that Kulick fills with some soloing. Even that, like all of a sudden you just have these like weird wide open spaces, you know, and you're sort of suspended in air for a few beautiful seconds, you know? And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like a really good like photographer who can take like landscape pictures, but they're not taking a photo of anything in particular. It's just like, it almost maybe looks incidental, where there's like half a mountain and you're not really sure the composition, like you're not really sure what you're supposed to be looking at, like, but it you're affected by it anyway. That's the fucking, like, amazing. Like, a fucking masterpiece. This is one of the greatest things that Lou Reed ever recorded. It is an absolute masterpiece. Lights out. Perfect. And then, and also, again, just Kulick. Like, we have Kulick playing all over the place. We have Kulick filling the spaces, just as it would happen on a doo-wop record, right? Like, it's this fascinating through line, and that and the vocals, that there's this constant, you have these constant other voices that are present. It's just such a cool way of building an atmosphere and creating a headspace for this, for the world that this album lives in. So speaking of Phil Spector, he had a song by Jerry Bo Kino called "Here It Comes and Here I Go," and I feel like that's like one of the only other like real touchstones for what they're doing there. And obviously we know Lou Reed would have been super into Phil, right? So, but I feel like there is that's part of what I love about it, though, because and it's not that it's like self-deprecating, but it's that it how do I phrase it? Like it diffuses, it has the ability to like very naturally diffuse the tension that it's creating, and that it still feels very, for lack of a better way of putting it, very like street and very like New York and wounded romantic in New York. And that's part of what I love about it. Now, speaking of texture and speaking of using the studio as an instrument, it perfectly sets the stage. So we have the two epics on side on side one, both 6 minutes each. Okay, so we have the two epics on side one, both are 6 minutes each. And that perfectly sets the stage for Kicks. And that's the duality, and that's part of the genius of this album, okay? And that's part of why it's so brilliant and multi-layered, okay? So then we have Kicks. And Kicks is like, so it had already become a really, really brilliant performance piece on tour. It would continue to evolve, perhaps into an even greater one. We'll be covering that in the next video. Fucking Kicks. So here, as a studio, as a piece of studio artistry, right? We have the overlay of the voices. So we have the overlay of this conversation, of these multiple conversations all happening. And then I don't even know what you would call it, like a jazz shuffle, like a mutant jazz shuffle, right? And in that you have Reed, who is wide-eyed and twitching, and this is the same guy from Crazy Feeling. This is what he wanted the person in Crazy Feeling to know. Like, I'm fucking like this. Okay, this is what you're getting. All right, you're getting crazy motherfucker. Okay, like, and you need to know what you're getting into. You need to know. All right. And so Kicks is like, and yes, obviously it's character, and he's inhabiting this character and running around that. But in that, it is super, super, super believable, because Reed, we know, and that's one of the things. Like back then, let me tell you, back then. So I used to fucking weigh like, 124 pounds. I mean, I was tiny, I was spindly, and I'm short to begin with. So like, holy Christ, man, like you think I move around in videos and shit, you think I'm twitchy now, you've no fucking idea, man. Like, I actually like that I weigh a lot more than I used to, because it has actually slowed me down like a good step. And quite honestly, I fucking needed that, like, because I already, like, I can't sit still as it is, so, like, I fucking get it. I get it, And, yeah. So, like, I completely understand the fucking headspace of this song. And there is something, it's so dark, right? It's so dark, and it's so fucking evil. And the fact that Reed can go into the heart of evil and use the same, like, sonics that him and Godfrey Diamond and this band have fucking crafted so far, that this is yet another extension of their language that they have invented for this fucking masterpiece. Like, this is a perfect fucking song and a perfect realization of this song, because they're not trying to replicate what it is on stage. Also, the coiled tension and then the springing out, the basically like jazz licks that fucking Bob Kulick is playing are perfect. And the fact that he can go from beautiful fucking near kind of at times stadium rock soloing of the previous song into this, like, this stuff is fucking for the ages. Like, his fucking guitar playing, like, I'm gonna fucking say, you know, there's Bob Quine, there's Sterling Morrison, like, there's Mick Ronson. Bob Kulick has a place next to all of them just off of this one album. I love his playing on this thing. And again, the fact that who in the world would think of doing like a modernist doo-wop album, like a modernist New York album? Like, that's not a thing that exists, right? And the fact that it's a very, like, far-out concept, right? And that, and you know, I think one of the reasons why doo-wop, I think it's like with big bands, I think, like, doo-wop has kind of like a lame reputation because people do lame versions of it, and they lame it out. And this thing that is so pure and so real and beautiful, right? It's so easy to corrupt it. It's so easy to make it fucking wrong and gross and slushy and sentimental and fake or emotionally manipulative or whatever, right? So the idea to like route into the square center of that fucking stuff and to expand from there, that's conceptually really, really out there. And this fucking guy just picks up on it and fucking runs with it and is adding all these variations. Bob Kulick's guitar playing is fucking outstanding. So I salute you, sir. Like, fuck yeah, right on. But again, this is Reed's show, because the rhythm section, not to downplay them, but they hold it down. And then you've got the Godfrey Diamond, Lou Reed fucking sound fucking machine going, right? So that's all beautiful and fucking fantastic. But really, it's Reed. It's Reed. It's him inhabiting this character. It's this fractured, fucked up monologue, and you're just getting the little spare bits. This is Travis Bickle before Travis Bickle. This is freaky, dark, creepy, weird stuff. And the when the blood runs down his neck and the jump scare cut of the voices going up, and then the fact that they do it again later. And when I'm pretty sure what you mostly hear is Reed's voice saying the word Slavic, but it sounds like sloppy or like, and you start like reading things into all of that. Fucking beautiful. And that's a beautiful use of abstractions. So that's another extension off of what we got going on here, right? And another use of pure sound exploration, like of playing with all the different elements. So what we have in development here on something like Noise, right? Or what you get on The Murder Mystery or some of the stuff on White Light, White Heat. Like, this is then the mature extension of that. He's bringing it all back home. He's tying it all together. But the other thing is, because all of these songs are next to each other, and this is part of where I consider these two albums some sort of weird twins in a weird way, is you're putting all of these seemingly diametrically opposed angles right next to each other. You're juxtaposing all of these things that seemingly shouldn't fit together. And what starts to emerge from that, especially with the sort of demi-monde subtext of Crazy Feeling and stuff, what starts to emerge is a really interesting, complicated value system, a really strange, skewed sort of modern sense of morality and right and wrong, and really it's what it is to be an outsider. This is navigating being an outsider. You're outside of your family, you're outside of society. Like, this isn't somebody who wants to be outside society like some other people who maybe maybe over-egg the pudding occasionally in their attempt to convey that about themselves. This is somebody. This is like actual outsider. This is like, you know, this is a person that doesn't fucking fit. And one of the reasons that's so interesting to me with Reed sometimes trying to make more mainstream music, or his love of Sam and Dave and the Supremes and everything else, is, you know, and it's like what I talked in the last video about depression. Like, when you're actually an outsider, you don't really want that. Jack Grisham talks about that. Like the real punks that he knew didn't want to be punk. They didn't have a choice. They kept fucking up. They weren't trying to be punks, you know. And that of the real outsider is you're trying to figure out a way in. And it's the same thing with depression. Like, you don't really want to stay in that state. You don't really want to be there. You're looking over at the other side going, fuck, I wish I could figure out a way to get into that. Get over there, you know? Because you're living it. And you figure out ways how to live with that, and you figure out how to navigate that. And that's part of what this is. This is figuring out, this is navigating, for lack of a better word, the politics of all of that, right? So there's a weird sense of morality in all of that. And part of what I think is so interesting about that is, you know, Reed in this time and on stage would, and certainly in interviews, he would say things that were very controversial. He would say things that would be all sorts of problems now. But really what he's doing here, and what my fucking man is doing here and did the next year, you know, what they're doing is they're staking out freedom on their own terms. They're staking out freedom and creative expression on their own terms as a necessary, vital way of having to live your life. That there isn't life without the vital, open, free expression. So yes, all the words, even those, right? So this is something I wrote down for this video. As I discussed in my Husker Du video, we live in a time somewhere between corporatism and phony intellectualism, where we try to reduce a painting or take one tiny part of a painting and blow it up and isolate everything else. And you know what happens when you do that? It becomes distorted and unnatural. You cannot put the ocean in a cup, and you cannot turn the jungle into your own personal hedge maze. Art is not your garden. It is the jungle, and it is wild in the jungle. And nature, true and real human nature, will reclaim it. So as Richard Hell once said, liars beware. So that's what this is. So yes, all words. The artist needs to have absolute and total creative freedom. It is so beyond vital. So even the shit that you hate has to exist. Or even the stuff that you don't like or makes you uncomfortable or challenges you has to exist. And when Reed writes a song like Kicks, he is out on the fucking forefront of that. Fearlessly. And it's not reckless. Because he obviously knows what the fuck he's doing, because he's a true artist. So that's how side one ends. Monumental album, right? Masterpiece. Working on such a multiplicity of levels. And not in a, like, overly obvious, ambitious way. It's all fucking happening. It's all there, right? Fucking, it's masterful what he's pulling off here. But let us continue forward. So now we will flip the record over. Side 2 of Coney Island Baby kicks off with A Gift, not to be confused with The Gift from the White Light, White Hate. Just under 4 minutes. I absolutely love this song. Lou Reed's sense of humor. It is a sly, really funny, really, really charming song. I'm just a gift to the women of this world. And the sighing, whispering of the backing singers is just fantastic. Again, it's a beautiful use of the studio as an instrument. It's a beautiful use of the sonic elements and the language that Reed and Godfrey Diamond have created. It's part of why I love the production of this so much. The rhythm section and Bob Kulick and Reed's guitar kind of just they don't, it doesn't do that much. It doesn't need to draw attention to itself. It's all in the subtleties and the wink and the smirk of Reed's vocal delivery, and it is just such a funny song. It's such a great song. I love the hell out of it. And the album has been pretty serious up to this point, as joyful as it's been, as expressive as it's been. I think it needs, I think it benefits from a lighter, funnier song like this. And Reed always really did have a great sense of humor, and I think that that's something that offsets stuff, excuse me, even going back to the Velvet Underground, there were jokes hardwired. I mean, the European Sun being sort of not a joke, but that there was a playful aspect, given that Delmore Shorts hated lyrics in rock songs, you know. So that's a through line with him, and it was all the way there. So I love Reed's sense of humor, and I love that it gets a chance to come out here. And then we move into Ooh Baby. And Ooh Baby is the exact same length as A Gift, which is pretty funny to think about. And this gives Bob Kulick, we have more great Kulick, you know, kind of, it's more call and response playing, and again, beautiful guitar tone. I mean, there's not a lot of different tones explored on this album. There is, by the way, some really nice counterpoint stuff. Is it on Charlie's Girl? I want to say there is some really cool counterpoint stuff kind of mixed in the background. But again, what is done with the guitar tones is beautiful. And again, Kulick just plays, you know, beautiful, great rolling licks. Again, I'm now going to reference Crazy Mama again. This predates Crazy Mama, but it has that same great sense of forward motion without trying to like jolt you forward. It's a great rock and roll song. It's obviously one of the lesser songs on this album. I think as a pot boiler, because it's kind of a Lou Reed pot boiler, sort of like Wagon Wheel or some of the things that flesh out in between some of the major songs on Transformer. But just like Walk It and Talk It and some of the other, even Foggy Notion to a degree. But Lou Reed's pot boilers are better than most people's best efforts. So it's a great song. The lyrics are actually really interesting, because the lyrics are actually very fully composed and are actually kind of a more fully composed version of Charlie's Girl. So I've always seen a connection between those two songs. So, and again, great use of the backing vocals. Like, it is a great song. It's just when you have this many highlights, you know. Then there's Nobody's Business. Now, Nobody's Business is interesting because Nobody's Business, that opening, first of all, the opening with the panning of the cymbals, it's almost like sort of an experimental ambient piece that kind of prefigures what's going to wind up happening again on some of the stuff on the bells, especially on side one of the bells. And I should say, when listening back to this album one final time for making this video, my cat was sitting on my lap, and she followed the cymbals the entire time. So when it would hit the crash, there was this every time, and it was very adorable and funny. This is what's interesting to me about Nobody's Business, and we're going to get into this more I was setting this up a lot in the last video, but I think we're actually going to get into it when we get into Rock and Roll Heart. One of the elements that Reed was also reclaiming, so we've talked about abstractions, we've talked about purity, we've talked about guitar playing, we've talked about all these different things with Reed, but his ability to extemporize songs, and his ability to just basically, to put it in a hip-hop context, freestyle. And this very much feels like it was a very quickly conceived piece of writing, and it definitely prefigures, if the intro prefigures the bells, this really prefigures what's going to happen on Rock and Roll Heart. And this just very quick, in the moment, it feels like a kind of a studio improvisation, and then it cohered into a song. And again, this was something Lou Reed was doing way back in the Velvet Underground, where he just, I mean, listen to all those early alternate versions of Sweet Jane, where he would just seemingly come up with completely new lyrics on the spot. That amazing on 1969 Live early version of New Age, right? So Reed's ability to do that, Reed's ability to freestyle songs and song structures, so lyric, melody, song structure, arrangement, Reed seemingly can do that out of thin air, and this is a great example of that. And again, it has that really charming sort of New York thing where you really do feel between the sort of the doo-wop and the rock and roll and the R&B, and sort of the jazzy shuffleness of it, to use one of the great Edwin Canestracci words. He has introduced a few words into my vocabulary in the last couple of years. The main one, of course, being gonzo, but jivey. I love fucking jivey. Perfect. Like there's not a better fucking word that the English language has produced to describe it. But it is that sort of Coney Island on the boardwalk, that thing that you feel in New York, that interesting thing that's so tangible of the combination of sort of the Italian thing, the Jewish thing, the Puerto Rican thing, the black thing, all simultaneously, all at once, and it's so palpable when you're in New York. And that is something, for as much as New York has changed, that feeling is still undimmed. I haven't been there since 2017, but even in 2017, like, there it was. So, no matter what happens in New York remains, and I find that fucking fascinating about the place. And Lou Reed was always able to just like hotwire straight into that sensibility. And this is a beautiful evocation of that. So I wanted to kind of race through those because now we're gonna get to the serious stuff. So they're great songs, but they are lighter, lesser songs. Side 1 is basically nothing but masterpieces, and then side 2 is dominated by the title track. So the title track. 6.5 of the most perfect minutes that you're ever going to hear, basically. And it is interesting because I talked about the live, some of the live performances of it in 1975 and how it had very quickly turned into a really sort of powerful anthemic chorus, and it would return back to that in the 80s, so that the one Live in New York video that I talked about in my 80s video, the one that has the Chantels on it and Jim Carroll, that one, it's like fully back into like anthemic, rousing, powerful rock chorus territory. But it's interesting, again with Kicks, Reed didn't try to replicate that in the studio, and I think to great effect. So I think that the title track is one of like the 5 best things that Lou Reed ever did. So the title, of course, comes from the Excellence song Coney Island Baby. And there's the purity of that song, the expressiveness of that song. So please check out the playlist that I put together. I'll link to it. It's here on YouTube. You know, everything is kind of contained in the DNA of that song, because that song is very vulnerable, but there's also, I feel like I'm wearing a crown, and then there's Please Don't Ever Go, and there's yearning, there's the sense of love being, the promise of love being fulfilled. All of these things are contained in the DNA of that song. And again, what Lou Reed does is he routes straight into the core sensibility of it, and then expands on that, right? So what we have is a beautiful, just simple acoustic. I mean, this is one of the great, and it certainly has been in my life, one of the great, like, 1 in the Morning albums. This is one of the great albums after you've survived it all, right? And when you really are after your two good friends have gone and ripped you off, and you're alone, and you are with yourself, and you are with your thoughts. And that is what this album is. And this is the masterpiece on the masterpiece, right? And so one of the things I want to touch on is, I think that in Reed's sense of psychology, and Reed's sense of aesthetics, and Reed's sense of, and I've made a lot of comparisons with this album to the third Velvet Underground album. I think that there's a lot of shared DNA between those two things. I think there's a lot of shared DNA here. And one of the things is, what Reed is doing is, especially on this album, on this song, but Reed is dealing in core things. He's on the ground and looking at, he's like, taking soil samples and measuring the purity of the water. And I think what Lennon achieves are the larger defining statements, right? And he was great at that. John is great at writing the headlines. And and somebody has to do it. John is like Andy Warhol in that sense, of creating these brilliant, overriding pop art statements, these declarative pop art statements, right? That people can understand, because he's crystallizing things in the moment, and then it's boiling it down to an essence, but that essence is then understandable to the public. It's maybe beguiling or confusing, but it is something that captures the attention as much as the soup cans, right? And that is what John can do, and what John is talking about in terms of relationships, in terms of humanity, in terms of love, in terms of reconciling the good and the bad, and the dark and the light, and all of your different emotional tangents and fragments and phases. But like I say, he can boil that down into these larger declarative kind of newspaper headlines, and that's part of his genius. But I think where Reed comes into this is, Reed is maybe then more like the philosophy of Andy Warhol. So if John is able to write the headline, right, Lou Reed is the fine print. Lou Reed is on the ground. So John's up in the clouds. And Reed is on the ground. And that is the connection for me between these two great artists, the two men who truly loved rock and roll and needed rock and roll, and who rock and roll served a crucial, vital function in their lives. And then that resonates out to all of us, because let's face it, who the fuck else is watching this, right? So, and Coney Island Baby is maybe the ultimate of that. It starts off with the, startling vulnerability of that opening monologue. And it's interesting because it's kind of a riff on Sinatra. It's a riff on a lot of things. It's a riff on the speaking parts of doo-wop records. And Reed had done it kind of as a piss take on oh Jesus, I can't. Where you leave, I Found a Reason. It's sort of a piss take, ironic thing on I Found a Reason. But this is wide open, and this is absolutely fucking fearless. It's fearless to be the rock and roll animal, and to have been raked over the coals as the rock and roll animal, and then to be raked over the coals again with Metal Machine music. And part of the whole deal with Ken Glancy was, you could do anything you want, you could make whatever record you want, as long as it's not Metal Machine music, and that is fearless, that is vulnerable. And for somebody who had had so much adversity in his young life, and who knew he was different, and had to, and his outsiderness sort of could not be contained, and even when he would try to comb his hair back and put on a sweater and it would keep spilling out of him, right? And he had no choice. That's extremely vulnerable, because it's not vulnerable in countercultural terms. It's vulnerable in cultural terms, which is countercultural. So that as the wanting to play football for the coach, that's even more far afield than if he was, let's say, outing himself. And Transformer, Transformer is very fey and very campy. This is the soul of a man. This is what he is. And so this is all of the parts coming together, right? So this is him reconciling all of these different aspects. So the purity, the abstractions, all of it, the Demamond, the suburbs of Long Island, all of it. He's reckoning with all of it. That monologue is fucking beautiful. And then for him to go into the verses and the sort of logic jump into the verses, and it feels very sort of modern day in the city. Those are beautiful verses. And then we have, and I gotta name them by name again, Joanne Vent and Michael Wendroff, the two of you, God bless the two of you, doing the Lord's work. Those backing vocals and their little melismatic flourishes are absolutely perfect. And then you have Bob Kulick's guitar, which is between jazz and early rock and roll, and absolutely perfect. This is another, literally every single note he plays in these opening passages of the song are like, there could be no other note. And when he plays almost like a celeste pattern, like just gold fucking dust falling down from heaven. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful notes that he chooses. Absolutely perfect. And even when it goes into the soft crash of what the rhythm section does, like that soft crash, and also the way then that's mixed, and Godfrey Diamond putting that across. Like this is everybody working outside of themselves in a really unbelievably beautiful manner. And then and it goes through those choruses, and it's always interesting how Reed goes into like princess and knight language and Knight. Like he really believes in that stuff, and he believes in the glory of love after everything he's been through and after everything we all go through, and he still believes in that, and it still means something to him, and that it's still worth fighting for, and to not give up and to not be cynical, and to deal with everything that you are, and all of your instincts, and all the wonderful things about you, and all the bad things you do and say, all of that. He's putting all of that forward. He's reconciling all of that. And understanding of you, and understanding of himself, and putting that out there for the listener so you could do that for yourself. And it's a map of the soul and a map of the heart, and the things that matter the most in life. And that is extremely, extremely brave and extremely, extremely naked for an artist to do. And the hardest thing to do is to go out there and be that brave and that naked in your art, and that brave and that naked in your expression. That is incredible. That is incredible. And Reed always talked about, and so, yes, all you need is love. All you need is love. This is the nitty-gritty. This is the dealing with what that is on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis, where you have to reconcile everything about yourself. And all the different voices in your head, right? And Lou Reed jokes about that on Take No Prisoners, my several selves, And he understands, and he is making real records about real people for real people. He's broadcasting out to you. And that's why on New Sensations, when I'm doing the things we want to, he says, it's some way, you guys are the best friends I've ever had, because it's a naked, unguarded relationship. And that he's putting his faith in you. And he's putting his faith in the future, the people are going to hear it, and they're going to get it, and it's going to resonate with them, and it's going to mean something to them, and it will ultimately help them. So you have bigger statements, and then you have the subtle, the nitty-gritty statements. And you need both. I think you need both for the complete protein, so to speak. And then you have that outro, and the glory of love, and what Bob Kulick kicks into, and that mood shift, that is all beautiful. That all feels very natural. We heard the one alternate take. It's perfect. It's a perfect recording. And I think the thing with Reed, and the thing with this being a modern doo-wop record, a real rock and roll record, that is at the emotional core of what this music is and what these ideas are about. In film, you have that at the end of Wild at Heart, and you have Cheryl Lee appearing to Nicolas Cage, and he's like, I can't, I'm wild at heart. I love David Lynch's dialogue of that, I'm a manslaughterer, and I never had parental guidance, and he's in that weird Elvis simulacrum, and she's doing the Wizard of Oz simulacrum. But what she says is so important. And so, like what I was talking about earlier, that you're setting up all these different devices and you're putting on these masks, but you're doing that in order to tell the truth. You're doing that, you're setting up all, he set up all this cast of characters. He deliberately set up all these things in his life. He deliberately used all this different imagery, but he set it up for the clear moment, the straight, clear moment of telling the truth. And the straight, clear moment of telling the truth is when fucking Cheryl Lee says, if you're really wild at heart, you will fight for your dreams. Don't turn away from love. And don't turn away from the glory of love. And that's what matters. That's what matters. This is a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite albums ever made. I live because of this album. I have lived because of this album. This album makes complete sense to me on every level. It is a masterpiece. Oh, Jesus. And then the outro, where he invokes Miss Rachel and talk about Coney Island Baby and the excellence, right? It's happening right in his back door, right? Coney Island, like he lives, and that. And all the kids at PS1, perfect, I didn't know what PS meant back then. I had to find out. I worked with somebody who was from New York, and I actually said, what is PS 192 mean? Me at 18. So it's a masterpiece. This is one of the greatest albums ever made. And I absolutely love it. And so I will just very quickly say, I will talk about these songs. I'll talk about this maybe more later in a later video. We do have the two outtakes from this period. We have Leave Me Alone and we have Nowhere at All. Nowhere at All is one of Lou Reed's greatest rock and roll songs. Bob Kulick plays his fucking ass off on it. It's one of the best rock and roll recordings of the 70s. Wouldn't have made any sense on this album, but it's beautiful, and the band really gets to rock. Reed sounds fucking great. It's a masterful rock and roll song. And then Leave Me Alone. I'll talk about more in context someday when I get to like Street Hassle, when I talk about Reed in 78. That'll be somewhere down the line. I'll maybe save that for that. And then the final thing I will touch upon is Mick Rock's incredible photography. There are a lot of photos from this. I think I'll probably throw those up maybe in the next video. Because some of that stuff was used as iconography in bootlegs, and also outtakes from this stuff were used for the Walk on the Wild Side Greatest Hits collection, which came out in 77. But this photo shoot, and then the other photos of Reed in the plastic suit with the gun and the eyeliner, amazing. And Rachel's obviously in those as well. Like, those are so, but that's the balance, right? You have this, and then you've got the fucking lunatic in the plastic suit with the gun, and that's the balance. That's the She's My Best Friend. That's Kicks. That's nobody's the Ooh Baby and Coney Island Baby. It's this very strange, very interesting morality. It is the purity and the distortions or the abstractions happening at the same time, and that photo shoot is as artful as the album is. And so this album artwork is amazing, but that entire photo shoot is just totally fucking incredible and fearless. Absolutely fearless. The guts that it took to do this and to do it in public, growing up in public. Amazing. So, that is my review of Coney Island Baby. I thought I was going to start crying. It almost happened. It almost happened. And do please check out the playlist that I made, just because, like, why don't you write me a letter, darling? I think that you listen to that song, that is part of the core of this. If you look at a song like Smoke From Your Cigarette, that's part of the core of this. And if you look at, like, questions such as, why can't I be loved? That's part of the core of this. You know, the real emotional guts and the purity and the vulnerability and the belief in love, the need for love, and the need to live and to connect. And these things are very, very important. And the beauty of rock and roll and the vital, vital function that serves in our lives. So, anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this. I still have to do the third part of this, where I will talk about Rita performing in '76, as well as the as well as the Rock and Roll Heart album. I will get to that. But this video, I wanted this one to just stand alone, completely, entirely on its own. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. I will see you very soon with the third and final part of this trilogy. So excuse me, and until then, oh, and I've gotten more subscribers, so we're very, very close to 200, so tell your friends. And so please like and comment and subscribe. I've gotten some really, really great comments on here and on Facebook, so I very much appreciate every single one. And so anyway, I will see you all next time, and until then, bye!
Just finished watching Rich Talks Records. Now the anticipation for the next episode.